Hi, in this video we're going to be going over using Massachusetts administrative materials on Westlaw and Lexis. So I'm not going to be doing a lot of examples of full text searching because the principles that we've gone over in prior weeks are going to apply for doing full text searching for Massachusetts regulations and administrative decisions. What I do want to show you though are some of the features that are available, particularly on Westlaw and Lexis for doing research for regulations and administrative decisions. I also wanted to remind you that in addition to full text searching, there are other entry points for finding Massachusetts regulations that are on point for your case, and some of those were mentioned in the reading. And the most important ones are using secondary source materials and also using annotated statutes. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the features for Massachusetts administrative materials. And I'm going to go into the Massachusetts page, we've done this before, and browse to the material I want so that I can show you coverage. So there's a couple of different things that are available to you here. There's the Massachusetts regulations. This is the CMR database. There are also some administrative decisions right underneath that, and at the bottom of the page there's proposed regulations. So this would be equivalent to the text of the Massachusetts Register. So let's start with Massachusetts regulations. I want to show you a few features here. So this is the table of contents with all the different titles, and as you can see, each title has a board or a department, an administrative agency associated with it, and if we click in, we get all of the current regulations of the particular board or department. So that makes it really nice and organized and an easy way to sort of browse to get to regulations if you know you're working with a particular agency. The other thing I want to show you are these tools and resources on the right. When you drill down to a particular database in Westlaw, you often get some helpful tools over here. And the ones I want to point out to you are the Massachusetts historical regulations. So just like when you're doing research with statutes, if your cause of action happened in a prior year and there's been an amendment since it happened, you're going to want to look at an older version of the regulations just like you would with the statute. So that's why this is helpful, and it goes back, quite a number of years. There's a similar database on Lexis as well. Again, here you have access to the Massachusetts proposed regulations. So this would help you if you need to know if there are any emergency regulations or what has been proposed in Massachusetts. We'll take a look at that in a minute. Okay, so now I want to go into an actual section of the CMR, and I'm just going to pull something by citation so that I can show you a few features. And I've just picked a random section, 310 CMR 10.59. We'll just pull it by citation so I can show you those features I have in mind. So obviously if you get to a regulation that you think is on point, you're going to want to read and think about the language of the regulation itself. A lot of times there'll be some cross-references and you'll want to go and look at those as well. So if there's cross-references highlighted, sometimes you'll get statutory references highlighted, and if you hadn't read this part of the statute already, you go and read that. Additionally, for your research, there's no flag here, so we don't have like a negative treatment flag, but we do have some citing references. So this would be another place where you could expand your research looking at cases or administrative decisions, for example, that had talked about this section of the CMR. Another feature I wanted to remind you of is the table of contents feature. Rick mentioned how this is really important for statutes. Well, the same applies for regulations. Oftentimes there's other sections of the statute that you're going to want to look at, so you might need to look at section 1060 that has to do with an evaluation. You might look at the general provisions. Definitely if there's a definition section, you're going to want to look at the definition section. So the same rules that apply for statutes are going to apply for looking at probably multiple sections of a regulation. I mentioned in the first video that a lot of times you can look inside the CMR itself to find the enabling statute. So I want to take a look at this very beginning part under wetlands protection to show you that. And you can see here that in the introduction and purpose section, they're telling us that this first section is promulgated under the authority granted in the Wetlands Protection Act, and we're getting a clickable reference here to the Massachusetts statute. Finally, I mentioned updating, and I wanted to show you on Westlaw where you can tell how current the particular provision of the CMR that you're looking at is. On Westlaw, it's down at the bottom. So if I scroll to the bottom, I get a currency date, and I know that this part of the CMR was last updated on January 15th. So if any emergency act that has something to do with this CMR section has been passed since January 15th, that's something that I would need to know. So I'm going to show you now how to update that using the proposed regulations database we talked about. So there are a couple of entry points for this database, including the main Massachusetts page that lists all the resources, but I'm back on the Mass Regs page. And the database I want is Massachusetts Proposed and Adopted Regulations. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my citation in here in quotes. And sometimes I also like to run some keyword searching because this is only going to pick up if there's been a change to my exact section 10.59, but if, for example, an additional section had been added on at the end, I'm not going to get that information. So this is just something to keep in mind, but I'm going to quickly show you running a search for this particular section 10.59. And you can see that I am getting results, but they're older results telling me about permanent regulations that were put into place in the past in 2014. So I know that I only need to update from the date that was at the bottom of the regulatory section, which was January 2016. So I know I'm okay for this regulation that I'm interested in. I wanted to take a minute to show you how you could use a statutory section to find the corresponding regulation. So I'm just going to pull a statute by citation. And in this one, I've pulled just one that has to do with the Division of Fish and Wildlife, which is what we were kind of already looking at. And if I look, I'll just say sometimes it's under context and analysis, but it's not for this one. So that would be if there was a regulation referred to as it was in the books. For this one, they didn't reference a particular section of the CMR. But under citing references, I can see that one of the things they are giving me is the corresponding regulation. So when I'm on Westlaw, I check these two sections to see if there are any regulations on point. So that was a little bit about finding and using the regulations. Let's take a quick look at what's available for administrative decisions on Westlaw. So I'm just going to go back out and back into the Massachusetts materials. And instead of going into regulations, I'm going to go where it says administrative decisions and guidance. And you'll see that there's not a lot of administrative agencies here, but there's some really important ones. So there's, for example, the Commission Against Discrimination Decisions. And one reason I like to go in this way is if I click into a particular agency decision, I can get a sense of what the coverage is. So I know that the coverage here goes back to 1999. Sometimes it doesn't say it right here, but usually if I click on the little I get some sense of what the coverage is. Okay, so those are some hints on finding administrative materials on Westlaw. Now let's take a minute to look at some of these same features on Lexis. So on Lexis, you could narrow your search by clicking on this and picking Massachusetts and regulations and administrative materials. But what I want to do is browse so that you can see what's available on Lexis, and I'm going to pick state Massachusetts. So you can see here when I scroll down that I'm getting the administrative code here, as well as the Massachusetts Register, so there's some coverage there. And then I'm also getting, under all Massachusetts administrative materials, decisions of the administrative agencies that are available on Lexis. So let's first take a look at the Code of Massachusetts Regulations on Lexis. So I want to look, it's giving me a lot of search help here, but I'm just going to again pull my section by citation so that we can look at the features. So let's look at some of the features that are similar to what we just looked at on Westlaw. So the first thing you're probably going to notice is there's no citing references. So not only do we not have any flags, we don't have any ability to shepherdize this document. We do have how current it is. Instead of being at the bottom like it is on Westlaw, it's right at the top on Lexis. And we do have archive code versions. So we can see if we needed something that was older than this version, we could look here to see which of the older versions of the CMR are available on Lexis. Another feature on Lexis that's nice is that at the bottom of the language of the regulation, we get a statement about the statutory authority. So right here we can see where is the authority from the legislature for the agency to have promulgated this regulation. Okay. So since there's no ability to shepherdize, I want to talk a little bit about how to create your own citator using the citation here. So I'm just going to copy the citation really quickly and go to a database that includes Massachusetts, and I also want to have administrative materials and cases. And then I'm going to put quotation marks around my CMR citation and run a quick search. And this way I'm going to get cases and administrative decisions that talk about the particular CMR section. And you can see I have one case here in the Mass Land Court, as well as some administrative materials, which are administrative decisions. So some from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, for example, that talk about this particular part of the CMR. And this is how I would create my own citator for a particular CMR section. Again, if I wanted to capture more than one section, I might put in, for example, 310 CMR in quotes and then some of my key language. I wanted to show you a difference with using statutory materials on Lexis to find administrative regulations. So let's just pull up, if I can type it in here, the same statute that we looked at on Westlaw. So I wanted to look at this same statutory section on Lexis. This is the same one we looked at on Westlaw. And we found the CMR section that was related to the statute by looking at the KeyCite results. Here, if we shepherdize this document, there's no results, and no results at all, but there's no CMR results either. So where I found it here, and I just want to mention this to you so that you know there's more than one place to look, in addition to shepherdiazing to see if there are any regulations mentioned, you also want to look down at the annotations. And if you look down here, you'll see that one of the things it has are, it gives you a sense of where the regulations, and this is miscellaneous, so it's got more than one here, but miscellaneous regulations relating to this particular statute and where they can be found in the CMR. Okay, lastly, let's look at what's available for administrative decisions on Lexis Advanced. And again, I'm going to go state Massachusetts and just browse to them so that we can get a sense of the different administrative agencies that are available. And as you know, we can also use the exhibit that was in the Handbook of Legal Research to give us an idea of what's available for the different administrative agencies. Not all of them, but a lot of the important ones. So here I am on the Massachusetts page, and I'm under Administrative Materials, and I'm going to open that up. And just like when we were on Westlaw, we can see which of the administrative agencies are available to us on Lexis. And by clicking on the I, we'll get a sense of what coverage is available for this database. For example, the environmental administrative decisions, well, that goes back to 1995 on Lexis. Okay, so that covers some of the tips I have for you on Westlaw and Lexis. I'm not going to cover Bloomberg or Fastcase or any of the other databases that you might have access to some administrative materials um, this week. I'm going to focus just on Westlaw and Lexis, and then on the next video we're going to do free sources and Social Law Library, the subscription database.